Charles Gibson.
I'm Nancy Snyderman in today for Joan London. It is Monday, November 30th. Another turning point for Russia this morning as Congress's People's Deputies convenes to pass judgment on Boris Yeltsin's reform plans. In this half hour, a veteran Russia watcher, Strobe Talbot, assesses Yeltsin's still uncertain political standing and the diplomatic challenges ahead for the Clinton administration. Spencer, you're back from down south.
Yeah, that's right. A little chilly, a little cold carrying in here, but I'm okay. I'll survive it.
Good.
Well, while the weather, Nancy, is relatively tame in the 48 contiguous states, the 50th state, Hawaii, generally accustomed to sunshine, has had torrential rainfall in the last 24 hours. Hilo, Hawaii, has measured 10 inches of rain. We'll update you on tropical downpours in this half hour.
And one more sign that we have transitioned holidays. We've got our studio gussied up right now for Christmas. Always nice when the Christmas decorations come in. The Williamsburg folks have been nice enough to dress us up a little bit for the season. And it's going to be nice next month.
Yep, it's a cheery time around here. Getting
ready for Christmas. And we're going to be mentioning that this season, obviously, the Thanksgiving weekend is sort of a litmus test for the American economy based on how much money you spent. It's your responsibility. How much money you spent at the mall this weekend. We're going to see how the shopping weekend went and just what kind of a harbinger that is for the economy. Also ahead, the combination of science and architecture is breathing new life into an abandoned inner-city housing project. We'll take a look at that. But let's get right to the news at this hour. And the lead story is the aftermath of violence in South Africa. Mike Schneider with that and the other news of the day. Mike?
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, everybody. The people of South Africa are clearly worried this morning, worried that a weekend attack on a white country club will put them back on a path that could lead to disaster. The attack happened in a place called King Williamstown. Now, the government and the African National Congress both are calling for calm, and they're urging people to join together. But everybody is worried that the massacre will trigger a violent response. Here's ABC's Don Cladstrip.
Police suspect that a militant black group, the Azanian People's Liberation Army, may have been responsible. 4 people were killed and 17 others were injured at this predominantly white golf club when 5 blacks entered, tossed grenades, and began shooting. The motive is unclear, but it was the first such attack on white civilians since the late 1980s. While it was seen as an isolated incident, the massacre fueled fears that conservative white extremists might try to exact revenge. South Africa is currently reeling from an unprecedented wave of violence. In the past 2 years, there have been 30,000 murders, 260,000 assaults, 140,000 armed robberies, statistics which have left this country in a state of shock. As violence escalates, some say South Africa is only a step away from anarchy.
We need an interim government. We need a good police force that is accountable and well-trained. We need economic development. And the only way we can really move on that is through some transition to a democratic South Africa.
Yesterday, ANC President Nelson Mandela issued an urgent call for negotiations.
I appeal with all humility to all political leaders in this country to join with us in trying to pull South Africa out of the present mess.
A situation many fear could plunge South Africa into deeper turmoil unless it is solved soon. Don Cladstrip, ABC News, Johannesburg.
This is the week that the UN Security Council is expected to take up the offer that the U.S. has made, the offer to send U.S. troops into Somalia to try to protect relief supplies. In the meantime, several hundred Marines are waiting aboard ships out in the Indian Ocean right now, ready to head to Somalia if and when the word does come. The Security Council is expected to accept the U.S. offer by the middle of this week. On to Germany now, where there have been 1,800 reported attacks against foreigners and Jews by right-wing groups, neo-Nazis, over this past year. That is now leading to new pressure on the German government to do something to try to end the violence. But the violence continues. Here's ABC's Jerry King.
German police are working on the assumption it was yet another attack by right-wing extremists. It was a home for foreigners seeking asylum in this country, and there were several instances of violence against asylum seekers over the weekend. Scenes like this are now commonplace. There have been more than 1,800 attacks this year, mostly against foreigners, but several have been against Jews. Given Germany's anti-Semitic history, the cabinet of Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin yesterday decided to demand
from the German government to take all the measures within the limits of the German law to put down these acts of violence that represents racism, neo-Nazism, and anti-Semitism.
Over the weekend, Education Minister Shulamit Aloni went further, calling on Jews to boycott travel to Germany. Here in Germany, there are reports that to escape the violence, 56 German Jews applied to go to Israel in October. That's 2.5 times the usual monthly total. But the leader of the Jewish community here says there is no reason for Jews to leave, and Israel's ambassador to Germany told a German newspaper whether the fear is justified objectively is an open question. Over the weekend, Chancellor Helmut Kohl vowed that he would put the full force of the law behind attacks on the right-wing extremists to try to do to them what they've been doing to others, so to speak. But it remains to be seen, both here in Germany and abroad, whether or not that will be enough. Mike?
Jerry, are there any distinctions to be made as to where these attacks are occurring, more in what used to be West Germany or in what used to be East Germany?
Statistically, the majority of the attacks are occurring in Western Germany, but in terms of brutality, it would seem that most of the really terrible attacks have been occurring in the East.
Any distinctions to be made as to the reaction on the part of the citizens of those respective regions?
I think in both sides there is a kind of a willingness to go along with the idea that foreigners ought to be out of here, at least a lot of foreigners. Those who have come in here seeking asylum, mostly on fraudulent grounds, a lot of people would like to see them gone. But as far as the people, for example, the Turkish community, the largest minority here, and others who have made their lives here, like the Jews, for example, a lot of people don't, of course, want to see them leave and certainly do not support the violence.
All right, Jerry, thank you very much. Jerry King live for us this morning in Germany. On to Russia now, where Boris Yeltsin got a boost as he prepares to try to defend his radical economic reforms before the powerful Congress of People's Deputies. The country's highest court ruled yesterday that Yeltsin was within his powers when he banned the National Communist Party and took back the state property it was running. Still, communists will be allowed to organize and campaign at the local level in Russia. Back in this country, Texas Senator Phil Gramm is denying that he did anything wrong in his dealings with a man who owned 3 failed Texas savings and loans. Gramm says he did help the man by the name of Jerry Stiles deal with federal thrift regulators when the S&Ls were in trouble back in 1989. But Senator Gramm says he had nothing to do with the $100,000 worth of work that Stiles did on Graham's vacation home in Maryland. Graham's only paid approximately half of what the total bill for that would be anticipated to be. Finally, it is that time of year again, time for Pasadena, California's annual Doodah Parade, which could be considered the world's goofiest, although there's been no formal count-up of that. Bill and Hillary Clinton were there, along with the Pope. Not really, of course. The trenchcoat-wearing Flasher Band made its much-anticipated annual appearance. And there's what we consider to be the highlight as well, the world's largest hairball, 3 feet in diameter. Unfortunately, we have no picture of the world's largest hairball, but after all, this is the breakfast hour, and we do try to retain some degree of taste and decorum here. On to Nancy and Spencer.
Speaking of decorum, I could have sworn that was you with the bass drum.
No, my musical career ended years before that.
Yeah. Oh, good thing your telecasting hasn't. Thanks, Mike. It's almost 9 after the hour. Time for Spencer and
Political showdown in Moscow this week. It's a situation you really ought to keep your eye on. Boris Yeltsin and his Russian reform plan will be put to the test when the Congress of People's Deputies convenes tomorrow. The Russians, of course, have their own internal battles, and, of course, how to deal with them is a diplomatic challenge for the incoming Clinton administration. Strobe Talbot is editor-at-large for Time magazine, which is devoting this week's issue to Russia. And Strobe is joining us from Washington. Good to have you back with us, Strobe.
Thank you, Charlie. Good to see you.
To what extent are the Russian reforms going to be under attack this week?
Well, they've been under attack for a long time, of course, for a couple of reasons. One is that the Communist Party, while it doesn't legally exist in the Soviet Union, and the former Soviet Union any longer, still has many adherents. And that includes a lot of diehards who would like to see some kind of authoritarian, if not totalitarian, system brought back to that country. And the other reason is that reform means hardship. It means sacrifice for the people. And real politics has come to the former Soviet Union and to Russia now. And that means that when people have to put up with very high prices and the threat of unemployment, they can take out their anger and frustration through the ballot box and through their representatives in the parliament. That's part of the process that we see going on right now.
Well, that's right. And the attack on the Russian reforms really comes to a head with the Congress of Deputies meeting. Is there a possible no-confidence vote? I mean, is this a battle from which Yeltsin might not emerge?
Well, I wouldn't want to rule that out, and I'm sure that President Yeltsin is not ruling that out, but I'm hoping that the Congress of People's Deputies, which begins this week, will turn out to be an anticlimax in a good sense. That is, that the suspense which is built up around this meeting will kind of peter out, and it'll turn out that once again, President Yeltsin will be able to prevail. There's some reason for thinking that might happen. First of all, President Yeltsin has already survived a no-confidence vote within the Russian parliament. And second, while the opposition is considerable to his policies, both at the grassroots level and among various political groups, the opposition has never coalesced against an alternative leader to President Yeltsin himself, and it's never coalesced around an alternative program.
Yeah, that's really where I was going. I mean, is there any kind of a viable alternative leader or really viable alternative program?
There's none on the scene right now. And that, I think, in a negative way, is one of the strong things going for President Yeltsin. What's going for him in a positive way is that he has proved himself to be an extraordinarily strong and deft leader, including in the way that he has moved into this meeting that we're now about to see. He's made a couple of what you might call tactical concessions. He's forced out a couple of his more controversial aides and ministers, but on the fundamentals of his program and on the key aides, particularly his acting Prime Minister Yegor Gaidar, he's held the line. And I think there's reason to hope that he will continue to be able to hold the line throughout this very difficult winter. And the fact that this is all taking place in the midst of a very hard winter, of course, complicates his challenge.
Strobe, deft he may be, but the immensity of the changes that they are trying to make, are they attempting too much, almost too fast?
Well, what alternative do they have? But you're absolutely right, Charlie, in describing this as a huge challenge, really unprecedented, not just in the history of that country, but in the history of the world. We often talk about this as a second Russian Revolution. It's really more than that. Yeah. Look at what Boris Yeltsin and his people are trying to do. They're trying to make a transition from a totalitarian dictatorship to democracy. They're trying to make a transition from a command economy to an open, free market. And they're trying to make a transition from a multinational empire to a nation state, all at the same time. No wonder there's a sense of the circuits being overloaded there.
You know, given the character of the opposition that you were describing, the reactionary nature of it, does American support help him or hurt him, Yeltsin?
American support is absolutely crucial, and there should be more of it. And not just American support, but support from the outside world, and particularly from the group of the 7 major industrial democracies.
But Strobe, you know as well as I, this election that took place here was decided on domestic issues. We have a new Congress chosen really on the basis of what it can do for American economics. Is there any particular mandate, do you sense, here to help?
Well, the election, of course, was won by Governor Clinton, who promised to concentrate on the home front and the American economy. But Governor Clinton, I think, has already established his internationalist credentials, and he realizes, as I think most Americans do, that isolationism is not an option for us. If we have international instability, we can't really take care of the problems we have on our home front. And one major cause of international instability would be an explosion of some kind in this massive country or collection of countries, the former Soviet Union, which still makes up the largest part, the 6th of the world's land mass. So if we don't do something to help the Soviet economy, it's going to be harder in the long run for us to do something about our own.
Strobe Talbott, editor-at-large of Time Magazine, devoting its issue this week to Russia. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Charlie.
Good to see you again. 16 minutes after the hour. Science and architecture. Create a living solution when Good Morning America continues.
I can't believe this.
Why? Oh, hi, honey.
I go shopping at Payless Drugs for